by their hair.
Yes, and I think we were partly responsible for that.
It looked that way to me, yeah. It was interesting, that flash of the Beatles there. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
now we know where that came from.
Well, the 60s in London, darling, was just incredible. All the talent from so many different countries just arrived. And we all worked with one another. I mean, in 57, I cut Mary Quant's hair. And Mary, we're still great friends. And never
The
done
mini
it.
skirt would not have looked good without that haircut, and the haircut kind of worked. It would not work with normal clothes. It looked really good with those 60s inspired clothes and short skirts.
Very much so. There was an added piece though. I cut her ear.
Oh, yes.
And I'm trying to pretend nothing's happened, and there's blood pouring down. And her husband's with her. He said, "You charge extra for that."
I assume eventually somebody did something about the ear.
Yeah, we had it sewn back on.
Okay. Very relieved. Was there any feeling at the time, because here in LA we so associate long hair with femininity,
Yeah.
and you know we see this on screen, television all the time. Was there any feeling at the time that these haircuts for women were masculine?
Oh yes, and some people wrote about it in that way. But then the younger journalists, they loved it. They were looking for something new, something they can get their pen into. You know?
What was the Barbara Walters story?
Oh, I did the morning show with Barbara Walters. What was her show? I was just a guest. And she gave me the award of the year for making women look ugly. I gave her an award for retrogressive thinking.
She still has that. She's stuck with that.
Well, it was the ladies that went to lunch.
Yes.
They went to have their hair teased, back combed, and boom, they went to lunch.
And of course, nobody really thought about the fact that that destroys your hair. All that teasing and setting and sleeping in rollers and hairspray.
You're so right, Mother. The thing about it also is that free hair, when it's cut beautifully, and I'm not just talking about short hair, we have pictures of long hair that's been cut with great angles. And when a woman shakes it, you know, even some guys have started to wear it. But when a woman shakes that hair, it's sexy.
Moving shiny hair is very, very sexy.
Absolutely, yes.
How did you do those original hairstyles without a blow dryer?
We didn't.
But in the 60s, I mean, there were blow dryers in the early 60s.
Oh, yes.
No? So we didn't come to them till much later.
Yeah, there was a German company that had them, and they were some of the earliest people to use them in England. But I think at one point, when you came to America, it was impossible to get blow dryers, right? It was when the salons opened in New York.
It was possible to get everything.
Do you think there's been a period, maybe the 80s punk period in New York, that's been as fertile and creative as, you know, the 60s in London?
Good question, because if I go back a bit, I think one of the most creative periods was the 20s.
Yeah, me too.
They cut their hair beautifully cut. They didn't have the cut. They didn't know exactly how to create that geometry. But
Those lines were very, very straight.
But there was something about it, the flapper look. It was quite tremendous. My two favorite decades would be the 20s and, of course, the 60s.
Hair to me now seems to be very undone. You know, it's no one's even really blowing their hair out anymore. It's just kind of messy hair is the thing. What do you think about that?
Well, it was great when they were cutting, and Roger Thompson, our #1 top artist, unfortunately he's not with us anymore, but he started to cut the geometrics, and then he would fine the sides. So you'd have this real geometric look with very fine sides. And I think that started it. He meant well, and he did well. But you do see...
So did that Jennifer Aniston haircut, by the way. Remember the Rachel haircut from Friends?
I find that the curtain look doesn't... I'm not appreciative of it. 2 hanging sides. Not even cut properly. If they were cut beautifully, fine. But I guess finance has a bit to say about it. You know, if a hairdresser can cut 4 heads in an hour, which you can't, not if you're doing it properly, you can't. Of course, they earn more money. And now, at this moment, there are people who do beautiful haircuts because they've been beautifully trained, not just by our people, but beautifully trained by many others. And I'm very proud of that part of the craft. But there is a part of the craft, of course, and we all know it, where the quicker you can cut the head and get them out. And I find that very sad because it has nothing to do with artistry. And we have a craft full of artists. We should never denigrate ourselves and just say, oh, I'm just a hairdresser. No, I'm a hairdresser, or I'm a hair cutter, I'm a colorist, and be very proud. Because when you analyze it, what else is there to make women look pretty? The substance growing from the head is the only thing that would change a woman's face and probably change the look in her eye. And you get this wonderful effect. That's why hairdressers usually are terribly nice. No, really.
Because they have to put up with crazy women.
No. Yes and no. But they're dealing with people that they have to make look and feel better every day. So if they can do that successfully and change the feeling and the look of an individual, just feel how the hairdresser feels. You know, it gives them that sense of, well, total joy, very simple. Total joy. Do you agree with me?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I have to say that total joy of life is what we get from you in this film. Like, you're so, constantly excited. It's very contagious.
From 54 on, when I was 14 in 1942, the war was on. And I worked for a man called Adolf Cohen in Whitechapel Road, which was the ghetto area of London. And he'd insist that your trousers had a perfect crease, your shoes were absolutely spotlessly clean, and of course your fingernails. And the war was on. How the heck were you going to do that? I mean, you were actually sleeping in shelters and in the underground. So he said, you'll sleep on your trousers, put a sheet on top of the trousers, not me, of the trousers, and you'll have a crease in the morning. Shoes, boot polish doesn't cost anything. And I'm only saying
By the way,
this. Sorry.
Vidal's shoes